Greetings, YouTube. The doctor is in. Dr. Urius Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. So, we're going to do an ongoing series, and that series is going to be Dungeons and Dragons commentary, specifically about power gaming and things that we can do to help ourselves in our game and be more efficient, and as a player, make our characters as efficient as possible. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, remember, hit the like button. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or comment. All right, so we are going to talk about the spell Find Familiar. And I specifically want to address how it works. And I want to address the most optimal ways that you can get it to work, or the most optimal choices that you have. And then I also want to address two different ways that you can use Find Familiar with specific kinds of character builds that make it very useful for us to actually cast a spell. So it's a pretty inexpensive spell. It's a first level spell. As you can see, it takes 1 hour to cast it. It does have a material component, which is 10 gold pieces worth of charcoal, incense, or herbs that you have to consume. So this is pretty easy. I mean, most of the familiars, you've got your choices: bat, crab, cat, frog, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, toad, poisonous, snake, fish, rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. Most of those choices do not have very many hit points. So your familiar may not actually be around for very long, but it only takes an hour to cast. So you can get a new familiar within an hour, within a short rest. So that's not too bad. And I've dungeon master groups in the past who have gone through a lot of familiars, particularly ones that have played through things like Tomb of Annihilation, where it's really important to have something that can deal with traps that you don't want to touch. So it's basically a spirit. It has to be within 100 feet of you. You can communicate with it telepathically. I mean, there's a number of things you can do. Now, in my opinion, Owl is probably the best choice because the Owl has two different things. It has a flyby attack. It has a flyby action, which means that if it flies away from something's attack range, there is not an opportunity attack. Then it also has keen hearing and sight, which means it has advantage on hearing and sight checks. Each familiar has a move and an action, but they cannot take the attack action. So as you can see here, it acts independently of you, and in combat it rolls its own initiative and acts on its own turn, but it can't attack. But it can take other actions as normal. So it cannot attack, and that's a very important term, because attacking is a specific action. So it has its own initiative. The Owl has a +1 because of its, I believe it's a 13 dex. And you can see through the familiar's eyes and hear what it can see as an action up to 100 feet. That's pretty important. And the familiar can be used to deliver touch spells using a reaction from you. So you can one really good use for a familiar is if you have the ability to find a familiar or cast Find Familiar, which is a wizard spell. And you also have spells that heal. You can use that familiar to deliver touch healing spells when needed, and I've seen that used very effectively. All right, so those are kind of the basic parameters of the familiars. And like I said, I think the Owl is the best one because of the flyby mechanic that it has and the keen hearing and sight. It also has a fly speed of 60 feet, which is really important. All right, so what are two different ways, two really, really powerful ways that we can use Find Familiar? Okay, so the first one is, remember I said in the previous slide that the familiar has a move and an action, and it cannot use that action for attack, but it can take other actions as normal, and one of those actions is the help action. So let's talk about the help action and your familiar. I also call this Pocket Owl. So that's basically the Owl comes out, and it, on its action, provides the help action. So it can lend aid to another creature in the completion of a task, that we're not really using it for that. What we're using it for is the second part. It can aid a friendly creature in attacking a creature within 5 feet of you. So with its action, the familiar uses the help action. The help action can be used to distract a creature within 5 feet of the familiar to help a friendly creature. Okay, so it says you faint, distract a target, or some other way. So the familiar comes within 5 feet of something. If it's the owl, flaps its wings, it screeches, it pecks at the thing, whatever. And then it's doing that to provide a distraction to the opponent so that an ally, this is the key term in this last sentence. It says if your ally, by saying your ally, that means you get to choose which ally is the subject of this. So if your ally attacks before your next turn, the first attack roll that ally makes is made with advantage. So the key term in here again is your. In the last sentence, that is, the familiar gets to determine who the ally is that it's helping, and with this, it's going to help its master, the person that the entity that summoned it. So the best way to use this is if you have a character with the sneak attack ability, for example, a rogue, and the ability to cast a Find Familiar, you can take advantage of this help action. And so some combinations of that, particularly for Adventure League, would be if you took a level in Wizard and a level in Rogue. So now you've got a Wizard who can cast first level spells, you can cast Find Familiar, and it is, as you can see here, it is a ritual. Up there at the casting time, there's a little R next to it. So it is a ritual. It doesn't take up a spell slot. You just cast it, takes an hour, you get yourself an owl. Okay, so the owl comes out on its turn, on its initiative. It moves within 5 feet of the target. It uses its action as the help action to help its ally, for example, the rogue wizard that summoned it against that target. The owl familiar moves away from the target, and its flyby allows it to avoid any opportunity attack. And then before the owl familiar's next turn, the rogue attacks with advantage, and therefore with sneak attack, because if a rogue attacks with advantage, they can use their sneak attack due to the help provided by the familiar. And then you just rinse and repeat after that. You just keep doing that over and over and over again. And I have specific rogue builds that pretty much almost all of them, if I'm going to be a combat rogue, they have familiars that do this, and we call it the pocket owl. The owl comes out of the pocket, the owl flies in the face of the opponent, screeches and claws and flaps its wings, and then the rogue comes in and stabs the opponent with advantage. Okay, so the second very effective way to use a familiar, and this doesn't necessarily go with the previous build, is with the spell Dragon's Breath. So Dragon's Breath comes from Xanthar's Guide to Everything, and you cast it as a bonus action. So if you have a person that has the ability, if you have a character that has the ability to summon a familiar and also to cast this spell, it's an arcane spell, it's a second level spell, so it's a bonus action to cast it. You touch one willing creature, your familiar, you imbue it with the power to spew magical energy from its mouth. An owl has a mouth, and you choose acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison until the spell ends. That creature can exhale that energy in a 15-foot cone, and it uses its action. That action is not an attack, so it uses its action, not yours, which is really important. So you're free to use your action. Now, the only kind of limitation to this is that Dragon's Breath is a concentration spell, so you can't cast any other concentration spells. But if you had a wizard, say, who's 5th level, and you cast this on your familiar for 1 minute, because you can see the duration here is 1 minute, for 1 minute, that familiar now has a breath weapon that has a range of 15 feet. And it uses its action to use that breath weapon. You choose the damage it does. And then after that, you have your own action left over, because it's acting on its own. You just direct it basically as a free action. And then you could cast Fireball or Lightning Bolt, something like that. Those spells don't require concentration. And so now you've got this kind of artillery that comes out. The some of the takeaways from this is, again, it's with the familiar's action. This is not an attack because no attack roll is made. The attack action is not made. It's just an action. And it also takes advantage of the owl's fly speed because the owl has a 60-foot fly speed, which means the owl could come in very quickly within 15 feet, breathe, acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, and then fly away pretty easily. And the owl's pretty mobile, so it can get around. So these are two different ways that we can use a familiar, particularly an owl, to enhance our character and to more importantly to power game, because that's really what we want. So thank you for tuning in, and be ready for more.